Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life Unraveling. Daniel Bradford adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror of his suburban home, the same routine he'd followed for 8 years of marriage. The morning light filtered through expensive curtains that Jennifer had insisted on, curtains that now seemed to mock him with their pristine perfection. Everything in this house screamed success. The marble countertops, the family photos arranged just so, the children's artwork magnet to the stainless steel refrigerator. But perfection, Daniel had learned, was often an illusion. "Daddy!" 8-year-old Emma Bradford came racing down the stairs, her blonde pigtails bouncing. Behind her, 6-year-old Michael followed more cautiously, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "Morning, Princess." Daniel caught Emma in a bear hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. These moments, these pure, uncomplicated moments with his children, were the only things keeping him grounded lately. "Mom's on the phone again," Emma whispered conspiratorially. "She's been talking to that man with the scary voice." Daniel's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Andre Velasquez. Even the children had noticed the change in their mother over the past 6 months. What they didn't know was that their perfect suburban life was built on a foundation that was crumbling beneath their feet. "Mrs. Bradford will be driving you to school today," announced Celeste Zimmerman, their live-in nanny, as she entered the kitchen. Celeste had been with the family for 3 years, and Daniel had always appreciated her discretion. Lately, that discretion felt more like uncomfortable silence. Jennifer appeared at the kitchen entrance, phone pressed to her ear. At 34, she was still stunning, the kind of beauty that turned heads at school functions and made other wives whisper. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite the early hour. But Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her free hand fidgeted with her jewelry. "I have to go," she said into the phone, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We'll talk tonight." She ended the call and forced a smile. "Morning, everyone." "Morning, Mom." The children chorused, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around them. Daniel studied his wife's face. 20 years in Black Ops had taught him to read people like open books, and Jennifer's pages were filled with secrets she thought she was hiding. The late-night phone calls, the sudden girls' nights out, the way she flinched when he touched her, all pieces of a puzzle he'd been pretending not to solve. "I'll be working late again tonight," Daniel announced, testing the waters. "The Peterson security contract needs to be finalized." Relief flickered across Jennifer's features so quickly that someone else might have missed it. But Daniel Bradford missed nothing. "Of course," she said, already reaching for her purse. "I might catch dinner with Annie Ashley. Haven't seen her in ages." Another lie. Annie Ashley had moved to Portland 3 months ago, a fact Jennifer had apparently forgotten mentioning to him. After the family dispersed, Jennifer to drop the kids at school, Celeste to run errands, Daniel remained in the kitchen, staring at the family photo on the refrigerator. It had been taken last Christmas, all 4 of them grinning at the camera, wrapped in the warm glow of holiday lights. 6 months ago, when he'd still believed in the illusion, his phone buzzed. A text from his business partner, Mitchell McMahon. Intel came through. "You're not going to like it." Daniel's security consulting firm, Bradford & Associates, was a legitimate front for more specialized services. When corporate executives needed problems solved quietly, when wealthy families require protection that went beyond standard security, they called Daniel. His 20-year career with the CIA's Special Activities Division had given him skills that translated well to the private sector, and contacts that most people could only dream of. Mitchell had been his partner for 5 years, ever since Daniel had officially retired from government service. Unlike Daniel, Mitchell had never worked intelligence. He was pure corporate security, all above board and by the book, which made him the perfect frontman for their business. Daniel drove to their downtown office, a modest suite in a glass building that projected respectability without ostentation. Mitchell was waiting with a manila folder and the kind of expression that meant bad news. "You sure you want to see this?" Mitchell asked, holding up the folder. "I hired the investigator for a reason." Mitchell slid the folder across the desk. Andre Velasquez, 42 years old, originally from Chicago. runs a mid-level crime syndicate that specializes in money laundering, drug distribution, and protection rackets. Based out of the Docks District for the past 3 years. Daniel opened the folder, his face betraying nothing as he absorbed the photographs and documents. Velasquez was everything Daniel had expected. Expensive suits, gold jewelry, the kind of carefully cultivated image that screamed new money and dangerous ambition. Gets worse, Mitchell continued. He's been dating your wife for 4 months. Started right after she hired his crew to renovate that boutique she's been talking about opening. The boutique. Jennifer's latest passion project, the one she'd been mysteriously excited about. Daniel had offered to fund it himself, but she'd insisted on finding independent investors. Now he knew why. There's more, Mitchell said reluctantly. The investigator says Velasquez has been asking questions about you, specifically about your background and your skill set. Daniel closed the folder carefully. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest he knows you're more than just a security consultant. The kind that suggest he's planning something. For a moment, the office was silent except for the hum of air conditioning. Daniel's mind was already racing through possibilities, contingencies, potential scenarios. In the field, they'd called it war gaming, the ability to think 3 moves ahead of your enemy. There's something else, Mitchell said. The investigator thinks Velasquez might be planning to move against you soon. Like really soon. Define soon. Maybe days. Maybe hours. Daniel stood, straightening his jacket. 20 years of covert operations had taught him many things. But perhaps the most important was this. When someone threatens your family, you don't wait for them to make the first move. Where are you going? Mitchell asked. Home, Daniel replied. I think it's time Jennifer and I had an honest conversation. But as he drove through the suburban streets toward his house, Daniel's phone rang. Jennifer's number. Danny. Her voice was shaking, barely above a whisper. I need you to come home. Right now. There's someone here who wants to talk to you. The line went dead. Daniel's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. In the distance, he could see his house, their house, and a black Lincoln Continental parked in his driveway. The kind of car that Andre Velasquez would drive. The perfect life was officially over. But Daniel Bradford had survived 20 years in the shadows of international intelligence. A mid-level Chicago gangster who thought he could intimidate a former CIA operative was about to learn why they'd called Daniel the ghost in the service. The game was about to begin. Chapter 2, Shadows of the Past. Daniel parked 3 houses down from his own, muscle memory from countless surveillance operations kicking in automatically. The black Lincoln was still in his driveway, along with a second vehicle, a dark SUV that screamed muscle from 50 yards away. Through his living room window, he could see silhouettes moving around. His phone buzzed with a text from Celeste, at grocery store. Won't be back until 3 p.m. Children safe at school. One small mercy. Whatever was happening inside his house, at least Emma and Michael were out of harm's way. Daniel opened his glove compartment and retrieved his Sig Sauer P226, the same model he'd carried in the field. Officially, he'd turned in all his government-issued equipment upon retirement. Unofficially, a man in his line of work never really retired. He just changed employers. Moving through his neighbor's backyard, Daniel approached his house from the rear. The Johnsons were on vacation in Florida, their house empty and providing perfect cover. From their back fence, he had a clear view into his kitchen and part of the living room. Jennifer sat on their cream-colored sofa, her hands folded in her lap, her face pale but defiant. Across from her, Andre Velasquez lounged in Daniel's favorite armchair, as if he owned the place. He was exactly what the photographs had suggested. Mid-40s, olive skin, expensive clothes that couldn't quite hide the predator underneath. Gold watch, gold chain, gold teeth when he smiled. 2 other men flanked the room. The larger one, built like a linebacker, stood near the front window. The second, wiry and nervous, paced near the kitchen entrance. Both were armed, shoulder holsters visible beneath their jackets. Daniel could read the scene like a tactical assessment. Velasquez was confident, relaxed. This wasn't a kidnapping or a home invasion. This was a power play, a demonstration. The gangster wanted Daniel to walk into his own house and find them there, wanted to establish dominance on Daniel's own territory. Amateur mistake. Daniel's phone vibrated. A text from Jennifer's phone, but he knew she wasn't sending it. Come inside. Time to talk like men. Instead of entering through the front door like Velasquez expected, Daniel slipped through his basement window, an entry point he'd prepared years ago as part of his personal security protocols. The basement was finished but rarely used, and it connected to his home office through a hidden door behind his bookshelf. His office was exactly as he'd left it that morning, but contained secrets that Jennifer had never discovered. Behind the false panel in his desk, Daniel retrieved a second weapon, a tactical radio, and most importantly, a file that Velasquez would find very interesting. The file was labeled Chicago Outfit, Current Operations, and contained intelligence that Mitchell had helped him compile over the past year. Not for any active case, but because old habits died hard, and Daniel Bradford never stopped gathering information on potential threats. Now he was glad for that paranoia. From his office, he could hear voices upstairs, Velasquez's Chicago accent, rough around the edges despite the expensive education it couldn't quite hide. Jennifer's voice, higher pitched than usual, stressed. Told you he'd be here by now, Velasquez was saying. Maybe your husband ain't as tough as his reputation suggests. You don't know him, Jennifer replied, and despite everything, Daniel felt a flicker of pride at the steel in her voice. Oh, but I do know him. Daniel Bradford, former CIA, Special Activities Division. 20 years of wet work before he went private. They called him the Ghost because he could make people disappear without a trace. Velasquez's voice carried an edge of respect mixed with challenge. But that was then. Now he's just another suburban dad playing security consultant. Daniel smiled grimly. The intelligence was accurate but incomplete. Velasquez knew about his CIA career, but not about his current network, not about the favors owed and debts that could be called in. The gangster was operating with dated information. Time to correct that disadvantage. Daniel activated his tactical radio and sent a coded message to Mitchell. Nest compromised. Execute Phoenix Protocol. Phoenix Protocol was their emergency communication system, designed for situations exactly like this. Within minutes, Mitchell would have alerted their entire network. Former intelligence assets, now working private security, mercenaries with flexible moral codes, and at least 3 federal agents who still owed Daniel their lives. Moving silently through the house's lower level, Daniel positioned himself beneath the living room. The floorboards were original hardwood, and he knew exactly which ones creaked. More importantly, he knew the layout well enough to move through his own house like a ghost. His phone buzzed again. This time, a photo message from Jennifer's phone, Emma and Michael at their school playground, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. The message was clear without words. Daniel's blood ran cold, then hot. Threatening him was one thing. Threatening his children crossed a line that Andre Velasquez didn't understand the significance of. In Kandahar, they'd had a saying, never corner a ghost. It's the last mistake you'll ever make. Daniel typed a response. Coming up now. We need to talk. He emerged from his office and walked calmly up the stairs, making enough noise to announce his arrival. When he entered the living room, Velasquez's men tensed, hands drifting toward their weapons. Easy, boys, Velasquez said, gesturing for them to relax. Mr. Bradford and I are just going to have a civilized conversation. Daniel took in the scene with a tactical eye. Jennifer looked relieved to see him, but also guilty, her eyes not quite meeting his. Velasquez studied Daniel with the intensity of a predator sizing up potential prey. The 2 bodyguards were professionals, but not elite, good enough to intimidate civilians, not good enough to threaten someone with Daniel's training. Andre Velasquez, the gangster said, not standing, not offering his hand. I've been looking forward to meeting you. I can't say the feeling is mutual, Daniel replied, moving to stand behind the sofa where Jennifer sat. Close enough to protect her, far enough to maintain tactical mobility. Sit down, Bradford. We got business to discuss. I'll stand. Velasquez's smile didn't reach his eyes. You know, most men in your position would be a little more cooperative, especially considering the circumstances. Most men in my position have never had to extract a hostage from a Taliban stronghold, Daniel replied calmly. Different perspective on what constitutes a real threat. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Velasquez's casual demeanor hardened, and his men shifted nervously. You think this is a joke? Velasquez leaned forward. You think I'm some small-time punk you can intimidate with war stories? I think you're a mid-level operator from Chicago who's made the mistake of bringing a knife to a gunfight, Daniel said. I also think you have about 30 seconds to explain what you want before this conversation takes a turn you won't enjoy. Danny, please, Jennifer started, but Velasquez cut her off with a gesture. What I want is simple, Velasquez said. Your wife wants a divorce. I'm here to make sure you don't cause any complications. Daniel looked down at Jennifer, who still couldn't meet his eyes. Is that true, Jen? She swallowed hard. Yes, I want a divorce. Then you should have asked for one, Daniel said quietly. You didn't need to bring muscle to our house. See, that's where you're wrong, Velasquez interjected. Jennifer told me all about you. Your background, your skills, your connections. She was worried you might not take the news well. So she asked her boyfriend to threaten me in my own home. I prefer to think of it as providing security during a difficult transition. Daniel studied Velasquez's face, reading the micro-expressions that most people missed. Confidence, yes, but also something else. Anticipation. This wasn't just about Jennifer or the divorce. This was about something bigger. What do you really want, Velasquez? The gangster's smile widened. Smart man. Jennifer told me you were smart. He reached into his jacket and Daniel tensed. But Velasquez only withdrew a manila envelope. I want to take a look at these. He tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. Daniel picked it up, opened it, and immediately understood why Velasquez was so confident. Photographs. Daniel entering a warehouse in the Dock District 6 months ago. Daniel meeting with Ernesto Avery, a known arms dealer. Daniel accepting a briefcase from Craig Schwartz, a money launderer who'd been on the FBI's watch list for years. All legitimate business meetings for legitimate security contracts. But photographed without context, they looked like something else entirely. Insurance, Velasquez explained. In case you decide to be uncooperative. Daniel set the photos down carefully. These prove nothing. They don't have to. Federal prosecutors love narrative. Bradford, former CIA operative gone bad, using his connections for illegal arms deals, money laundering. Even if they can't prove it in court, the investigation alone would destroy your business, your reputation, your freedom. Now, Daniel understood. This wasn't about Jennifer. This was about eliminating him as a potential threat to Velasquez's operations in the city. The divorce was just a convenient cover story. What are your terms? Daniel asked. Simple. You sign the divorce papers, give Jennifer everything she wants, and disappear. Change cities, change careers, change your life. In return, these photos disappear, and everyone stays healthy. And if I refuse? Velasquez's smile turned predatory. Then the photos go to the FBI, and those beautiful children of yours get to visit Daddy in federal prison. Assuming Daddy survives long enough to go to trial. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Daniel could feel Jennifer's eyes on him, could sense the fear radiating from her. She'd gotten in over her head with Velasquez, but now she was trapped just as surely as he was. I need time to think about it, Daniel said. You got 24 hours, Velasquez stood, buttoning his jacket. Tomorrow night, same time. You give me an answer, or I make the decision for you. The three men moved toward the front door, but Velasquez paused at the threshold. Oh, and Bradford, don't try anything clever. Those photos are just copies. And my people will be watching your kids. For their protection, of course. After they left, Daniel and Jennifer sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, she spoke. I'm sorry, Danny. I never meant for it to happen like this. Daniel looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw not the woman he'd married, but a stranger who'd sold him out to save herself. No, he said quietly. I don't think you did. But as he watched Velasquez's car disappear down the street, Daniel Bradford was already planning his next move. The gangster had made one crucial error. He'd assumed that a former intelligence operative would play by civilian rules. that was about to prove fatal. Chapter 3. The Point of No Return. 24 hours. Daniel sat in his home office after Jennifer had gone to bed, studying the photographs Velasquez had left behind. Each image was professionally taken, the kind of surveillance work that required patience and resources. This wasn't the product of a local crime boss getting lucky. This was organized, methodical, expensive, which meant Velasquez had backing. Serious backing. Daniel opened his secure laptop and accessed databases that officially didn't exist. His retirement from the CIA had been amicable, and certain access privileges had been overlooked during his exit processing. A useful oversight that had served him well in the private sector. Andre Velasquez's file was extensive. Born in Chicago to a mid-level mob family, he'd worked his way up through violence and cunning. But 3 years ago, he'd relocated to Daniel's City with significant financial backing. The source of that backing was listed as unknown in most reports, but Daniel knew how to read between the lines of intelligence files. The money was coming from the Torino family out of New Jersey, old-school Italian-American organized crime with connections that reached into federal law enforcement. If Velasquez was their advanced scout for expansion into new territory, it explained the sophisticated surveillance and the federal-level blackmail strategy. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Children are beautiful when they sleep. Emma's room faces the backyard. Michael's faces the street. Sweet dreams. The photo showed his house at night, taken from across the street. Velasquez wasn't just threatening. He was demonstrating capability. Daniel moved to his bedroom window and peered through the blinds. A dark sedan was parked 3 houses down, practically invisible except to someone trained in counter-surveillance. Another car would be watching the back of the house. Professional work. In the bed behind him, Jennifer pretended to sleep. Her breathing was too controlled, too measured. She was as awake as he was, probably terrified of what she'd set in motion. Daniel made a decision. He slipped out of the house through his basement exit and made his way to the garage, where his motorcycle waited under a tarp. The Kawasaki Ninja was painted matte black and modified for stealth. No reflective surfaces, dampened exhaust, and engine tuning that prioritized quiet operation over speed. 20 minutes later, Daniel was across town at the 24-hour diner, where Mitchell was waiting in a corner booth, his laptop open and files spread across the table. "You look like hell," Mitchell observed as Daniel slid into the opposite seat. "Feel worse. What did you find?" Mitchell turned his laptop around. Andre Velasquez isn't just some Chicago transplant. He's connected to the Torino crime family out of Newark. They've been looking to expand operations westward for the past 5 years. I figure as much. What about local connections? That's where it gets interesting. Mitchell pulled up a series of photographs. Remember Councilman William Conway? The one who's been pushing for waterfront redevelopment. Daniel recognized the face. A local politician with mayoral ambitions and a reputation for getting things done through questionable means. Conway's been meeting regularly with Velasquez for the past 6 months, Mitchell continued. Always at the Riverside Hotel, always in the same private dining room. My source in hotel security says they discuss construction contracts, labor unions, and shipping permits. They're setting up a logistics network, Daniel realized. Use legitimate construction and shipping to move drugs and money. Conway provides political cover. Velasquez provides muscle and connections. Gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. Mitchell slid another file across the table. Jennifer's boutique? The one she needed independent investors for? It's being funded through a shell company that traces back to Torino interests. Daniel stared at the financial documents. Jennifer hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been recruited. The boutique was meant to be a front for money laundering, and his wife was either a willing participant or a useful idiot. There's more, Mitchell said grimly. I called in a favor with the FBI. There's no active investigation into you based on those photos Velasquez showed you. Which means they're fake, Daniel finished. Or at least taken out of context and never submitted to law enforcement. Exactly. This is pure intimidation, backed by nothing but bluff. Daniel felt a cold smile cross his features. In the intelligence world, there is nothing more dangerous than an enemy who overplayed their hand. "What's the plan?" Mitchell asked. Before Daniel could answer, his phone rang. Jennifer's number, but when he answered, Andre Velasquez's voice came through the speaker. "Hello, Bradford. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Where's my wife?" "Relax. She's safe. We're just having a little conversation about tomorrow's meeting." There was a pause, then Jennifer's voice, shaky but trying to sound calm. "Danny? I'm okay. We're at the Riverside Hotel. He just wants to talk." The line went dead. Daniel closed the phone and looked at Mitchell. "Change of plans. They got Jennifer. This is escalating fast. Maybe we should call the police." "No." Daniel's voice was flat, final. "Police involvement means media attention, federal investigation, and months of legal proceedings. By the time it's over, Jennifer could be dead, and the kids would be targets for retaliation. So what do we do?" Daniel stood, pulling on his jacket. "We remind Mr. Velasquez why the CIA doesn't recruit from anger management classes." The Riverside Hotel was a downtown establishment that catered to business travelers and hosted political fundraisers. Built in the 1920s, it had the kind of old-world elegance that made it popular with people who wanted to project respectability while conducting questionable business. Daniel and Mitchell entered through the lobby, drawing no attention in their business attire. The private dining rooms were on the third floor, accessible by elevator or service stairs. Daniel chose the stairs. "You sure about this?" Mitchell whispered as they climbed. 20 years ago, I extracted a Russian arms dealer from a fortified compound in Chechnya," Daniel replied. "This is a hotel in downtown America." "I'm sure." The third-floor hallway was carpeted in deep red, with brass fixtures and oil paintings that screamed expensive taste. Daniel could hear voices from behind the door of the Wellington Room, Velasquez's favorite meeting spot according to Mitchell's intelligence. "How many hostiles?" Mitchell asked. Daniel pressed his ear to the door, filtering out the ambient noise to focus on individual voices. 4, maybe 5. Velasquez, Jennifer, and at least 3 others. "Plan. You stay in the hallway. If anyone comes out that isn't me or Jennifer, delay them." "Ow!" Daniel handed Mitchell a small device that looked like a hotel key card. "Emergency services override. Triggers the fire alarm and locks down the elevators. Gives us a 10-minute window before hotel security responds. And if hotel security shows up early, tell them you're with the fire department. Badge is in the briefcase." Mitchell looked at the briefcase Daniel had brought. "I don't want to know what else is in there, do I?" "Probably not." Daniel drew his Sig Sauer and attached a suppressor. Not the Hollywood quiet kind that made movies unrealistic, but enough to muffle the sound in a carpeted room. He checked his watch, 2:17 a.m. The hotel would be mostly empty except for late-night staff and insomniacs in the bar. The Wellington Room's door was solid oak with brass fittings, designed more for elegance than security. Daniel could pick the lock, but that would take time and create noise. Instead, he knocked. "Room service," he called out in a voice slightly higher than his normal register. Footsteps approached the door. Daniel positioned himself at an angle where he'd be partially concealed when the door opened. "We didn't order anything," came a gravelly voice through the door. "Compliments of the management, sir. Champagne and appetizers for Mr. Velasquez's party." A pause, then the sound of a deadbolt turning. The door opened 6 inches, revealing a heavy-set man with a shoulder holster. Daniel's training kicked in automatically. Assess, engage, neutralize. The man saw Daniel's weapon a split second too late to react. Daniel struck with the butt of his pistol, a precise blow to the temple that dropped the bodyguard instantly. He caught the man's weight and lowered him silently to the floor. Inside the room, Velasquez was holding court at a mahogany table, gesturing expansively with a brandy snifter. Jennifer sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. 2 other men flanked the room, the same ones from Daniel's house earlier. "See, Jennifer, your husband thinks he's still playing spy games," Velasquez was saying. "But this is the real world, where money and connections matter more than whatever James Bond bullshit he learned in government service." "You're wrong about him," Jennifer said quietly. "Am I? Then where is he? It's been 3 hours since I called." If he was really as dangerous as his reputation suggests, wouldn't he have found you by now? Daniel stepped into the room, his weapon trained on Velasquez. Yeah, I would have. The two bodyguards reached for their weapons, but Daniel had already calculated the angles. I wouldn't. Your boss is directly in my line of fire, and at this range, a hollow point round will go through him and into whoever's standing behind him. Velasquez raised his hands slowly, the brandy snifter still balanced in his right palm. Easy, Bradford. No need for dramatics. Tell your men to put their weapons on the table. Slowly. Do it, Velasquez ordered. The two men complied, placing their pistols on the mahogany surface. Jennifer, move away from the table, Daniel instructed without taking his eyes off Velasquez. His wife stood on shaky legs and crossed to where Daniel stood. Danny, I'm sorry. I never meant. We'll talk later. Daniel's voice was ice-cold, professional. Right now, Mr. Velasquez and I need to discuss his early retirement from my city. You can't just... One of the bodyguards started to protest. Sign the divorce papers, or I'll break your nose. Velasquez suddenly snarled, throwing his brandy snifter at Daniel. Your children are mine. Daniel dodged the glass projectile and let out a small laugh. Street fighting is so messy. 20 years as a deadly black ops operative taught me how to make a man vanish without a trace. Velasquez stepped back when Daniel's hand emerged from his pocket holding a small device, a GPS tracker that had been placed on the gangster's car hours earlier. Then Velasquez reached for his gun and made a fatal error. He forgot that Daniel Bradford had spent 2 decades learning how to kill people quickly and quietly. The sound-suppressed gunshot was barely louder than a book dropping. Velasquez's reaching hand froze 6 inches from his weapon as he looked down at the spreading red stain on his expensive shirt. That's a through-and-through wound, Daniel said conversationally. Painful, but not immediately fatal. You've got maybe 20 minutes before shock sets in. The two bodyguards looked between their wounded boss and Daniel's unwavering weapon, calculating odds they didn't like. Here's what's going to happen, Daniel continued. You're going to call your people and tell them the operation is over. Then you're going to get in your car and drive back to Chicago. If I ever see you in my city again, the next shot goes 6 inches higher and 3 inches to the left. You can't, Velasquez gasped, pressing his hand to the wound. The Torinos, they'll come for you. Let them come, Daniel said. I've been retired for 5 years. I'm probably getting rusty. In the hallway, the fire alarm began blaring. Mitchell's signal that hotel security was on the way. Time to go, Daniel announced. He grabbed the photographs from the table and pocketed them. Jennifer, we're leaving. As they moved toward the door, Velasquez called out weakly, This isn't over, Bradford. Daniel paused at the threshold and looked back. You're right. It's not. He raised his weapon one final time. But your part in it is. The second shot was perfectly placed. Daniel and Jennifer were in the hotel lobby when the first police cars arrived, 2 concerned guests who'd been awakened by the fire alarm and were evacuating the building like responsible citizens. By the time law enforcement found the Wellington room, Daniel Bradford was miles away, planning the next phase of an operation that Andre Velasquez should never have started. In the intelligence world, there was an old saying, if you strike at a ghost, you better not miss. Velasquez had missed. Chapter 4. The Network Awakens. The safe house was a modest cabin an hour outside the city, nestled in woods that provided natural cover and multiple escape routes. Daniel had purchased it through a shell company 3 years earlier, one of several contingency properties he maintained out of professional paranoia that was proving justified. Jennifer sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the hotel, and Daniel hadn't pressed her. There would be time for explanations later, after he'd secured their safety. Mitchell arrived at dawn with supplies and intelligence updates. He found Daniel on the cabin's front porch, cleaning his weapons with the methodical precision of someone for whom violence was a professional skill. Hotel security found the bodies, Mitchell reported. 3 dead, Velasquez and his 2 bodyguards. The 4th one, the guy he knocked out, was found tied up in a supply closet. He's claiming he doesn't remember anything. Wise man. Daniel reassembled his Sig Sauer with practiced efficiency. What's the official story? Gang violence. The police are treating it as a territorial dispute between crime organizations. No mention of you or Jennifer in the reports. Good. What about the Torino family response? Mitchell's expression darkened. That's where things get complicated. I reached out to some contacts in federal law enforcement. The Torinos aren't just angry, they're mobilizing. Word is they're sending Lance Lawrence to clean up the mess. Daniel paused in his weapon maintenance. Lance Lawrence was a name from the darker corners of organized crime, a fixer who specialized in making problems disappear permanently. If the Torinos were bringing in Lawrence, they weren't interested in negotiation. How long do we have? Lawrence flew into the city this morning. My source says he's already meeting with local contacts, putting together a team. Daniel stood, holstering his weapon. Then we don't have long. What about the children? Safe for now. I've got Raphael Arnold watching the school, and Celeste has been briefed on emergency protocols. But Daniel, Mitchell hesitated. Lawrence won't just come for you. He'll target anyone connected to you. I know. Daniel's voice was flat, emotionless. That's why we're going to take the initiative. Inside the cabin, Jennifer finally looked up as Daniel and Mitchell entered. Her face was pale but composed, the shock beginning to wear off. I need to know everything, Daniel said, sitting across from her. How did this start? When did Velasquez first approach you? Jennifer took a shaky breath. 6 months ago. I was looking at spaces for the boutique, and he was there, charming, sophisticated. He said he was an investor, looking for legitimate businesses to support. She laughed bitterly. I thought I was so smart, finding independent financing. When did you realize what he really was? Not until it was too late. By then, I was already in too deep. He had photos of us together, records of the money transfers, contracts I'd signed without reading carefully. She met Daniel's eyes for the first time since the hotel. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd destroy both of us. Cooperate how? Information. About your work, your contacts, your schedule. He wanted to know everything about your business dealings, especially the overseas contracts. Daniel exchanged a look with Mitchell. Bradford and Associates had lucrative contracts providing security for American businesses operating in unstable regions. Contracts that would be valuable intelligence for criminal organizations looking to expand internationally. Did you give him access to my files? Jennifer shook her head. I tried to avoid it, but he kept pressing. Finally, I told him about your home office, about the fact that you sometimes worked late there. He was planning to break in, Daniel realized. Use Jennifer as an inside source to bypass security and steal client information. But then something changed, Jennifer continued. About a month ago, he started asking different questions. About your background with the CIA, about specific operations you've been involved in. It was like he'd learned something that made him more interested in you personally than in your business. Mitchell leaned forward. What kind of operations? He mentioned names, Jennifer said. Places. Kandahar, Montenegro, something about a weapons dealer named Viktor Kozlov. Daniel went very still. Viktor Kozlov had been a Russian arms trafficker who'd sold weapons to Taliban insurgents in Afghanistan. Daniel had been part of the CIA team that had eliminated Kozlov and his network, a black operation that officially never happened. How could Velasquez know about Kozlov? Mitchell asked. Because someone told him, Daniel said grimly. Someone with access to classified CIA files. The implications hung in the air like smoke. If Velasquez had inside information about Daniel's covert operations, it meant the Torino family had connections that reached into federal intelligence agencies. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Bradford, we need to meet. I have information about your current situation that you'll want to hear. Midnight, Pier 47. Come alone. LL. Lance Lawrence. The fixer was moving faster than expected. It's a trap, Mitchell said immediately. Of course it's a trap. Daniel was already moving toward his equipment bag. But it's also an opportunity. An opportunity to get killed. Or to get answers. Daniel pulled out a tactical vest and began checking its ceramic plates. Lawrence wants to meet, which means he either wants to negotiate or he's confident enough in his preparation to risk a face-to-face encounter. And if it's the latter, Daniel's smile was cold. Then Mr. Lawrence is about to learn why the Torino family should have left sleeping ghosts alone. Jennifer stood suddenly. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Danny, this is my fault. I got you into this mess, You'll stay here where you're safe, Daniel interrupted. Mitchell, I need you to coordinate with our backup team. If I'm not back by dawn, execute the evacuation plan. What evacuation plan? The one where you get Jennifer and the kids out of the country and into a place where the Torino family can't reach them. Daniel handed Mitchell a sealed envelope. Contacts and financial arrangements. Everything you need is in there. As night fell, Daniel prepared for what could be his final operation. In his 2 decades of covert work, he learned that the most dangerous missions weren't the ones with the highest casualty rates. They were the ones where the enemy knew you were coming. Lance Lawrence was expecting him, but Daniel Bradford had spent 20 years exceeding expectations, and he wasn't about to stop now. Pier 47 was a commercial fishing dock on the industrial side of the harbor, a maze of warehouses, cranes, and moored vessels that provided countless hiding spots for snipers and ambush teams. At midnight, it would be deserted except for the occasional security patrol. Daniel arrived an hour early, using the time to scout positions and identify potential threats. Through his night vision scope, he spotted 3 vehicles parked in strategic locations around the pier, a classic triangulation setup designed to prevent escape routes. Professional work. Lawrence had brought a team. At 11:58 p.m., a black limousine pulled onto the pier and stopped near the edge of the water. A single figure emerged, tall, lean, wearing an expensive overcoat that couldn't quite hide the weapons underneath. Lance Lawrence. Even from a distance, he projected the kind of calm confidence that came from decades of survival in a business where mistakes were fatal. Daniel approached from the shadows, his own weapon ready but concealed. As he stepped into the light cast by the limousine's headlights, Lawrence turned to face him. Mr. Bradford, thank you for coming. Cut the pleasantries, Lawrence. What do you want? To offer you a choice. Lawrence's voice was cultured, educated, the kind of accent that suggested expensive schools and elite connections. You killed Andre Velasquez, which created a problem for my employers. Problems require solutions. I'm listening. Option 1. You disappear. Tonight. Take your family and vanish completely. New identities, new lives, new continent if necessary. In exchange, the Torino family forgets you exist. And option 2. Lawrence smiled, and it was like watching a shark prepare to feed. We settle this the traditional way. You die, your family dies, and everyone associated with you becomes a cautionary tale. Daniel pretended to consider the offer while actually scanning for the positions of Lawrence's backup team. 3 vehicles, probably 2 men per vehicle, plus Lawrence himself. 7 against 1, in an environment they'd chosen and prepared. Poor odds for most people. Acceptable odds for someone with Daniel's training. Counteroffer, Daniel said. You and your people leave my city tonight and never come back. In exchange, I don't kill all of you. Lawrence laughed. You're outnumbered 7-1, Mr. Bradford. This isn't Afghanistan or Montenegro. You can't just disappear into the mountains when things go wrong. You're right, Daniel agreed. This isn't Afghanistan. He triggered the explosive device he'd planted on Lawrence's limousine an hour earlier. The blast lit up the night sky, turning the expensive car into a fireball that illuminated the entire pier. In the chaos that followed, Daniel moved like the ghost his CIA handlers had nicknamed him, silent, deadly, and utterly relentless. The first 2 gunmen died before they understood what was happening. The 3rd and 4th managed to return fire, but they were shooting at shadows while Daniel picked them off with surgical precision. By the time the smoke cleared, only Daniel and Lawrence remained standing. The fixer had taken cover behind a shipping container. His composure finally cracked. Blood ran down his face from shrapnel cuts, and his expensive overcoat was torn and singed. This isn't over, Lawrence called out. The Torinos have resources you can't imagine. Connections that reach. Into the CIA, Daniel finished, stepping around the container with his weapon raised. I know. Victor Kozlov. Someone fed Velasquez classified information about my operations. Lawrence's eyes widened slightly. You're smarter than they said. Who's the leak, Lawrence? Does it matter? You're a dead man walking. If not tonight, then tomorrow. If not the Torinos, then someone else. You can't fight an entire organization. Watch me. The shot echoed across the water, sending seabirds scattering into the night sky. Lance Lawrence crumpled to the pier, his blood mixing with the salt water that lapped at the dock's edge. As sirens wailed in the distance, Daniel Bradford melted back into the shadows. The war with the Torino family was far from over, but the first battle was won. Now came the hard part, finding the CIA leak before more killers came for his family. Chapter 5: Ghosts in the Machine. The emergency meeting took place in the basement of Mitchell's downtown office building, a location chosen for its electronic shielding and multiple exit routes. Daniel had called in every favor, activated every network connection, and reached out to contacts he hadn't spoken to in years. The result was a gathering that looked like a reunion of the intelligence community's most dangerous alumni. Garrett Fry arrived first. Former NSA cryptanalyst turned private contractor, his laptop bag containing equipment that could hack into systems most people didn't know existed. He was followed by Joel Ferguson, an ex-Delta Force operator who now provided specialized security services for Fortune 500 companies. The third arrival surprised even Daniel. Virgil Peck, a current CIA analyst who owed Daniel his life from an operation in Syria 5 years earlier. Virgil's presence meant Daniel now had inside access to active intelligence files, a resource that could either save his family or get them all killed. "This is about the Torino leak," Daniel began without preamble. "Someone inside the agency fed classified information about my operations to a mid-level crime boss. That person is still out there, and they're a threat to anyone who's ever worked with me." Garrett opened his laptop and began typing. "I've been monitoring chatter since you called. The Torinos are mobilizing resources on multiple fronts. They've got teams coming in from Chicago, Newark, and Miami." "Timeline?" Joel asked, checking his weapon. 48 hours, maybe less. They're not being subtle about it. This is a full-scale war declaration." Virgil looked uncomfortable. "Daniel, what you're asking me to do, accessing personnel files to identify potential leaks. That's career suicide if I'm caught. And if you're not caught, it might save the lives of everyone in this room," Daniel replied. "The leak knows about Viktor Kozlov. That operation was compartmentalized at the highest levels. We're talking about someone with serious clearance and serious access. I'll need specific parameters," Virgil said, his fingers hovering over his phone. "Personnel with access to SA division files, operational history in the time frame you mentioned, any anomalous behavior patterns. Start with anyone who's had financial difficulties in the past 2 years," Daniel suggested. "The Torinos pay well for information, but they prefer to recruit people who need the money." As Virgil began his database search, Garrett's fingers flew across his keyboard. "I'm accessing the hotel security system from the night you took out Velasquez. Want to see who else was there that shouldn't have been." The hotel's guest registry appeared on his screen, along with security camera footage from the lobby and parking areas. Garrett fast-forwarded through hours of recorded data, looking for anomalies. "There," he said, pausing the footage. "Black sedan, arrived 30 minutes before the shooting, left 5 minutes after. License plate is registered to a shell company." "Can you trace the shell company?" "Already on it." More typing, more data streams flowing across the screen. "Corporate records show it's owned by another shell company, which is owned by interesting. What? The ultimate owner is listed as a trust fund managed by the law firm of Brennan, Walsh and Associates. High-end criminal defense attorneys who specialize in representing organized crime figures." Joel leaned over Garrett's shoulder. "Those are the lawyers who represented the Torino family during the federal racketeering trial 3 years ago." Daniel felt pieces clicking into place. The leak isn't just feeding information to the Torinos. They're working directly with their legal team. This is sophisticated intelligence laundering. Virgil's phone buzzed. "I've got something. 3 CIA personnel with access to your operational files have shown anomalous financial patterns in the past 18 months. He rattled off 3 names, but only one made Daniel's blood run cold. William Conway. "Wait," Mitchell interrupted. "William Conway, the city councilman? I thought you said he was CIA personnel." Different William Conway, Virgil clarified. This one is CIA Deputy Director William Conway, based out of Langley. 20-year veteran, currently oversees SA Division Operations Review. Daniel stared at the name on Virgil's phone screen. Deputy Director Conway had the access, the clearance, and the authority to obtain any classified file he wanted. If he was the leak, it explained how the Torinos had gotten such detailed intelligence about Daniel's background. What's his financial situation? Daniel asked. Clean on the surface, Virgil replied. But I'm seeing some irregularities. His son Jeffrey Conway was arrested for drug trafficking 8 months ago. High-end defense attorney, massive legal bills, case mysteriously dismissed due to insufficient evidence. Let me guess, Garrett said, already typing. Jeffrey Conway's lawyer was from Brennan, Walsh & Associates. Bingo. The Torinos bailed out Conway's son in exchange for Daddy's cooperation. Daniel closed his eyes, running through the implications. A deputy director feeding intelligence to organized crime was a security breach of catastrophic proportions. It meant the Torinos had access to ongoing operations, agent identities, and classified methodologies. There's more, Virgil continued. Conway has been accessing files on former SA Division operatives. Not just you, dozens of them. Names, locations, current employment, family information. He's building a database, Joel realized. The Torinos aren't just targeting Daniel. They're mapping the entire network of former CIA assets. For what purpose? Recruitment, blackmail, elimination, Daniel said grimly. Take your pick. A criminal organization with access to that kind of intelligence could effectively neutralize federal law enforcement efforts against them. Garrett's computer chimed. I've got Conway's current location. He's not at Langley. He's here in the city. Checked into the Meridian Hotel 6 hours ago. He's here to oversee cleanup operations, Daniel concluded. Make sure the Torino problem gets resolved permanently. What's the play? Joel asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering options. Conway was a federal official with diplomatic immunity and enough connections to make any direct action against him extremely dangerous. But he was also a traitor who'd sold out American intelligence assets to organized crime. We're going to have a conversation with Deputy Director Conway, Daniel said finally. Find out exactly how deep this goes and what other operations have been compromised. And then, Mitchell asked, then we're going to make sure he never sells out another agent. The Meridian Hotel was downtown's most prestigious accommodation, the kind of place where federal officials stayed when they wanted to project authority and importance. Conway had registered under his own name, a sign of either supreme confidence or supreme arrogance. Daniel's team positioned themselves throughout the hotel. Garrett took the lobby with his laptop, monitoring security systems and communications. Joel covered the parking garage and rear exits. Virgil remained in the office, providing real-time intelligence support. Daniel himself went straight to Conway's room. Deputy Director William Conway was exactly what Central Casting would order for a senior CIA official. Silver-haired, well-dressed, radiating the kind of quiet authority that came from decades of managing classified operations. He answered his hotel room door wearing a bathrobe and an expression of mild annoyance. Mr. Bradford, he said calmly, I've been expecting you. Have you? Please come in. We have much to discuss. The hotel suite was elegant and spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Conway gestured for Daniel to sit, then poured himself a scotch from the room's minibar. Drink. I'm working. Conway smiled. Yes, I suppose you are. Tell me, how much do you know about the current situation? I know you've been feeding classified information to the Torino crime family. I know your son Jeffrey was arrested for drug trafficking and mysteriously released. I know you've compromised the identities of dozens of former CIA operatives. Impressive. Your network is still functioning at high efficiency. Conway settled into an armchair across from Daniel. What else do you know? I know you're here to clean up the mess that Andre Velasquez created. Actually, I'm here to offer you a proposition. Daniel waited. The Torino situation has become complicated, Conway continued. What started as a simple intelligence sharing arrangement has evolved into something much larger. The family has ambitions that extend far beyond traditional organized crime, such as international arms trafficking, political influence operations, systematic corruption of federal law enforcement. They're building an organization that could effectively operate as a shadow government. And you're helping them. Conway's expression hardened. I'm trying to control them. Channel their activities in directions that serve American interests while limiting their domestic impact. By selling out CIA operatives? By providing carefully selected intelligence that keeps them focused on external targets rather than internal ones. Conway leaned forward. Daniel, the Torinos approached me 2 years ago with information about a planned terrorist attack on American soil. Information they'd obtained through their criminal networks. I had a choice. Work with them and potentially save American lives, or maintain operational purity and watch innocent people die. Daniel studied Conway's face, reading the micro-expressions that revealed truth from deception. The deputy director believed what he was saying, but that didn't make it any less naive. What's the proposition? Daniel asked. Join the operation. Use your skills and connections to help manage the Torino partnership. In exchange, your family's safety is guaranteed, and you gain access to intelligence resources that could make you one of the most powerful private contractors in the world. And if I refuse? Conway's smile was cold. Then the Torinos will kill you, your wife, and your children. And I'll file a report stating that former CIA operative Daniel Bradford went rogue and was eliminated while attempting to interfere with an ongoing federal investigation. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, considering not the offer but the man making it. Conway wasn't evil. He was something worse. He was a patriot who'd convinced himself that the ends justified any means, no matter how corrupt. One question, Daniel said. How many other agents have you burned? Only those who became problematic. Define problematic. Those who discovered the arrangement and refused to cooperate. Those who posed a threat to operational security. Those who... Conway never finished the sentence. Daniel's suppressed pistol made barely a whisper as it fired twice into the deputy director's chest. Those who sold out their country, Daniel finished quietly. As Conway's body slumped in the armchair, Daniel began searching the hotel room. In the deputy director's briefcase, he found files on 17 former CIA operatives, their current locations, family information, and assessment reports on their potential value to the Torino organization. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Garrett. Hotel security has been compromised. Torino assets in the building. You need to leave now. But as Daniel moved toward the door, he realized it was too late. Footsteps in the hallway, the whispered communications of a coordinated team, the subtle sounds of professionals preparing for violence. The Torinos had found him, and this time they'd brought an army. Chapter 6. The Trap Closes. Daniel assessed his situation with the cold calculation of a man who'd survived 2 decades in the world's most dangerous places. Conway's hotel suite was on the 15th floor, with bulletproof windows that wouldn't break, a single entry point that was now compromised, and no balcony access. The footsteps in the hallway had stopped, never a good sign. His phone vibrated with a text from Garrett. 8 hostiles professional gear. Elevator disabled, stairwells covered. They're not here to negotiate. Daniel moved Conway's body away from the door and began rapidly examining the room's layout. The Meridian Hotel was built in the 1980s, which meant certain architectural features that modern buildings lacked, including service corridors behind the walls for maintenance access. In the bathroom, Daniel found what he was looking for, a maintenance panel that accessed the building's ventilation system. The opening was barely wide enough for a person, but Daniel had squeezed through tighter spaces in Kandahar. A soft knock at the suite door interrupted his planning. Mr. Bradford? The voice was professional calm. My name is Felix Higgins. I represent the Torino family's interests. We'd like to discuss a peaceful resolution to this situation. Daniel remained silent, continuing to remove screws from the maintenance panel. We know you're in there, sir. We also know that Deputy Director Conway was meeting with you regarding our mutual arrangement. Perhaps we can find common ground. The maintenance panel came free. Daniel examined the ductwork. It was large enough for human passage and connected to a system that serviced the entire building. More importantly, it had access points on multiple floors. Mr. Bradford, I'm afraid silence isn't an option. We have other ways of encouraging conversation. Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo, Emma and Michael at their school, surrounded by men in dark suits. The message was clear: cooperate or watch your children die. That changed everything. Daniel activated his radio. Mitchell, are you monitoring? Copy that. Phoenix Protocol is now active. Initiate all emergency procedures immediately. Roger. What's your status? Compromised but mobile. The children are in immediate danger. Understood. Cavalry is en route. Daniel holstered his weapon and opened the suite door. Felix Higgins was a professional. That much was immediately obvious. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of calm confidence that came from never having to personally handle violence. Behind him stood 6 men who definitely did handle violence, all armed and positioned to cover multiple angles of attack. Thank you for being reasonable, Higgins said. Shall we discuss terms? Where are my children? Safe for now. Their continued well-being depends entirely on your cooperation. What do you want? Higgins gestured toward the suite's sitting area. May I? Daniel nodded, and they moved into the room. Higgins glanced at Conway's body without visible reaction. Apparently, deputy directors dying in hotel rooms was just another day at the office for Torino representatives. The situation has become quite complex, Higgins began. Deputy Director Conway's arrangement with our organization provided certain assurances about federal interference in our operations. With his death, those assurances are no longer valid. So find another corrupt federal official. We intend to. But first, we need to resolve the immediate problem, namely, your continued existence and the threat you represent to our interests. Daniel studied the positioning of Higgins' men. Professionals but not elite. Good enough to handle civilian threats, probably adequate against local law enforcement, but lacking the specialized training that marked truly dangerous operators. What are your terms? Daniel asked. Simple. You provide us with detailed intelligence on all former CIA operatives in your network. Names, locations, current employment, family information, personal vulnerabilities. In exchange, your children live and you're granted a quick death. And my wife, Mrs. Bradford, has already proven useful to our organization. She'll continue in that capacity under new management. Daniel felt the familiar cold focus that had carried him through countless operations. These people had threatened his children, planned to murder him, and intended to enslave his wife. In a calculus of violence that made them legitimate targets for elimination. I'll need guarantees, Daniel said. Proof that my children are unharmed, assurance that my wife won't be hurt, verification that you'll honor the agreement. Higgins smiled. Of course. We're businessmen, Mr. Bradford, not monsters. He gestured to one of his men, who produced a tablet computer. On the screen was live video feed from the children's school. Emma and Michael sitting in what appeared to be the principal's office, flanked by 2 men in suits. As you can see, they're perfectly safe, confused about why they've been removed from class, but unharmed. And Jennifer? Another video feed, his wife sitting in what looked like a warehouse office, also surrounded by guards, but apparently uninjured. Now, Higgins continued. Shall we discuss the intelligence transfer? Daniel nodded slowly. I'll need to access my files. They're encrypted on a secure server. Naturally, we brought equipment for that purpose. One of Higgins' men produced a military-grade laptop and set it on the coffee table. Daniel sat down and began typing, accessing what appeared to be an encrypted database. What he was actually doing was initiating a program that Garrett had designed for exactly this situation, a digital deadman switch that would simultaneously alert every law enforcement agency in the country, transfer all of Daniel's accumulated intelligence on organized crime to federal prosecutors, and activate emergency protocols for the protection of intelligence assets. This will take a few minutes to decrypt, Daniel said, continuing to type. Military-grade encryption isn't fast. We have time, Higgins replied, settling back in his chair. But time was exactly what they didn't have. 2 blocks away, Joel Ferguson was leading a team of private military contractors through the hotel service corridors. Mitchell was coordinating with federal agents who'd been waiting for an excuse to move against the Torinos. Garrett was systematically taking control of the hotel security systems. And in a suburban elementary school, Raphael Arnold was executing a precision operation to extract 2 children from armed kidnappers. Daniel's fingers continued moving across the keyboard, each keystroke buying precious seconds for his team to maneuver into position. The irony wasn't lost on him. The Torinos thought they were watching him transfer intelligence that would help them destroy his network. In reality, he was activating the same network to destroy them. "How much longer?" Higgins asked, a note of impatience creeping into his voice. "Almost finished," Daniel replied. "Just need to verify the integrity of the files before transfer." His phone vibrated once, the signal from Raphael that the children were secure. A second vibration, Mitchell confirming that Jennifer was safe. A third vibration, Joel reporting that his team was in position. "There," Daniel said, hitting the final key sequence. "Transfer complete." Higgins leaned forward to examine the laptop screen, which displayed what appeared to be a comprehensive database of intelligence assets. What he was actually looking at was a sophisticated decoy program that would keep him occupied for the 30 seconds Daniel needed. "This is quite impressive, Mr. Bradford. Our organization will make excellent use of this information." "I'm sure you will," Daniel agreed, then activated the smoke grenades he'd palmed from his equipment bag. The hotel suite filled with thick, choking smoke as Daniel rolled backward over the sofa. Higgins' men opened fire, but they were shooting blind at targets they couldn't see. Daniel, however, had memorized their positions during the conversation. His suppressed weapon spoke 4 times in rapid succession, and 4 bodies hit the floor. The suite door exploded inward as Joel's team breached the room, automatic weapons sweeping the area for remaining threats. Within seconds, the engagement was over. Felix Higgins lay unconscious in a pool of his own blood, the only survivor of his 6-man team. "Status report," Daniel demanded as the smoke cleared. "Children secure," Joel reported. "Raphael has them in protective custody. Jennifer, safe." Mitchell's team extracted her from the warehouse 20 minutes ago. Daniel stood, brushing debris from his jacket. "And the rest of the Torino operation?" "Federal agents are hitting properties across the city as we speak." Garrett's intelligence package gave them everything they needed for a full RICO prosecution. Through the hotel room's windows, Daniel could see FBI vehicles surrounding the building. In the distance, police helicopters circled other locations throughout the city, a coordinated law enforcement operation that was dismantling years of Torino influence in a single night. What about the other CIA operatives on Conway's list? Already contacted and warned. Most are going underground until the threat is neutralized. Daniel looked down at Felix Higgins, who was beginning to regain consciousness. The Torino representative's expensive suit was ruined, his calm confidence replaced by the dawning realization that his organization's expansion plans had just collapsed. "Mr. Higgins," Daniel said conversationally, "when you wake up in federal custody, you might want to consider cooperating with prosecutors. The evidence against your organization is rather comprehensive." Higgins tried to speak, but only managed a weak groan. "Consider it friendly advice," Daniel continued, from one professional to another. As federal agents flooded into the hotel suite, Daniel stepped back and watched the endgame of an operation that had begun with a simple threat against his family. The Torinos had made the mistake of believing that a retired CIA operative would be an easy target. They were about to learn otherwise. But the war wasn't over yet. Organizations like the Torinos had deep roots and multiple branches. Cutting off one head would only cause others to emerge, angrier and more dangerous than before. Daniel Bradford was prepared for that eventuality. After all, ghosts were notoriously difficult to kill. Chapter 7. Sins of the Father. The federal safe house was a nondescript ranch home in a gated community 40 miles outside the city, surrounded by the kind of suburban normalcy that made it invisible to anyone who might be looking. Daniel sat at the kitchen table with Emma and Michael, helping them with homework while FBI agents maintained perimeter security. 3 days had passed since the hotel confrontation, and the children still didn't fully understand why they were staying in a special house instead of going home. Daniel and Jennifer had crafted a story about bad people who were angry with Daddy's work, but eventually they would need more complete explanations. Jennifer entered the kitchen with a federal prosecutor named Sean Cantu, a serious man in his 40s who'd been building cases against organized crime for over a decade. The expressions on their faces told Daniel that the news wasn't good. "Kids, why don't you watch TV in the living room for a few minutes?" Daniel suggested. "The cartoon channel should be working now." After Emma and Michael left, Kenneth sat down across from Daniel. "We need to discuss the Torino situation. I thought that was resolved. Felix Higgins is talking. Your raids netted dozens of arrests, and Conway's intelligence network has been exposed." "Higgins is talking, yes," Cantu agreed. "That's actually the problem." Jennifer looked confused. How is cooperation a problem? "Because what he's telling us suggests the Torino operation was much larger than we initially understood," Cantu explained. "Conway wasn't just feeding them intelligence on former CIA operatives. He was helping them identify and recruit current federal agents." Daniel felt a chill. "How many?" "At least 17 that we've identified so far. FBI, DA, ATF, even some Treasury Department investigators. The Torinos weren't just building a criminal enterprise. They were systematically corrupting federal law enforcement. Which means," Daniel concluded, "that our current location and security arrangements may be compromised." "Exactly. We're moving your family again tonight, but there's a larger issue." Kenta leaned forward. "The Torino family patriarch, Gilberto Torino, has put a $10 million bounty on your head. Not just for killing Velasquez and exposing Conway, but for destroying their expansion plans." Jennifer paled. $10 million? "It gets worse," Kenta continued. "Torino has connections to criminal organizations worldwide. The bounty isn't just active in the United States. It's been communicated to the Sicilian Mafia, the Russian Bratva, the Yakuza, and various South American cartels." Daniel absorbed this information with professional detachment. A $10 million international bounty meant that professional killers from around the world would be hunting him and his family. It was a death sentence that money couldn't buy off and law enforcement couldn't completely protect against. "What are my options?" Daniel asked. "Witness protection," Cantor replied immediately. "New identities, relocation to a secure facility, federal protection for the rest of your lives. And in exchange, you testify against the Torino organization, help us identify and prosecute the corrupt federal agents, and provide intelligence on any other criminal organizations you encounter during your CIA career." Daniel looked at Jennifer, who was staring at her hands. The weight of what she'd set in motion by getting involved with Velasquez was clearly overwhelming her. "How long would we be in witness protection?" "Permanently," Candace said bluntly. "The Torinos don't forgive and they don't forget. Even if we destroy their current organization, the family has resources and connections that could pose a threat for decades. So my children grow up as different people, in a different place, never able to contact their friends or see their grandparents again." "It's not ideal," Cantu admitted, "but it's better than the alternative." Daniel stood and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the suburban street where federal agents were positioned to protect his family. In the distance, he could see Emma and Michael playing in the safe house's backyard, their laughter carrying on the evening air. They deserved better than a life spent hiding from their father's enemies. "There's another option," Daniel said quietly. "What's that?" Kenta asked. "I end this. Permanently." Jennifer looked up sharply. "Danny, you can't just kill the head of a major crime family." Daniel turned from the window. "Why not? I've done worse things for worse reasons." "Because it's murder," Candace said firmly. "Because it's illegal, and because it would make you a target for every law enforcement agency in the country." "I'm already a target for every criminal organization in the world," Daniel pointed out. "At least this way, my children get to grow up as themselves." Cantu shook his head. "I can't be part of this conversation. As a federal prosecutor, I have an obligation to—" "Then leave," Daniel interrupted, "because this conversation is about to become much more detailed." After Cantu departed, Daniel sat back down with Jennifer. The kitchen was quiet except for the distant sound of their children playing, oblivious to the forces gathering against their family. "You're really going to do this?" Jennifer said. It wasn't a question. The Torinos made this personal when they threatened Emma and Michael. There's no negotiation with people like that. No reasoning with them. They understand only one language. Violence. Final solutions, Daniel corrected. I spent 20 years learning how to solve problems that couldn't be solved through diplomatic channels. This is just another problem. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. "What do you need from me?" The question surprised him. "Nothing. I want you and the kids as far away from this as possible." "That's not what I meant." She met his eyes directly. "I created this mess by getting involved with Velasquez. I put our family in danger because I was selfish and stupid and thought I could have some kind of adventure without consequences." "Jennifer, let me finish." Her voice was steady, determined. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I can help fix it. Tell me what you need." Daniel studied his wife's face. The woman who'd been having an affair with a gangster 6 months ago was gone, replaced by someone harder, more focused. Someone who understood that some situations required extreme solutions. "Information," he said finally. "Gilberto Torino is insulated by layers of security and legal protection. But everyone has vulnerabilities. I need to know what his are. How we find that out?" "We asked someone who knows." Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Mitchell. "Package delivered. Ready when you are." The package was Felix Higgins, who'd been transferred from federal custody to a private facility that technically didn't exist. The transfer had been arranged through contacts Daniel preferred not to think about too carefully, but sometimes solutions required resources that operated outside official channels. The facility was a converted warehouse in the industrial district, secured by men who'd worked with Daniel in places where the rules of engagement were more flexible. When Daniel arrived, Higgins was seated in what looked like a corporate conference room, his expensive suit replaced by orange prison coveralls. "Mr. Bradford," Higgins said as Daniel entered, "I wonder when you'd come to visit. I need information about Gilberto Torino." "I assumed as much. What makes you think I'll provide it?" Daniel sat down across from Higgins. "Because you're intelligent enough to understand that cooperation is your only path to survival. The federal government is going to put you away for the rest of your life. But I might be able to arrange something more comfortable if you're helpful. And if I'm not helpful, then you won't live long enough to worry about federal prison." Higgins considered this for a moment. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Torino's security arrangements, his daily routine, his family, his business operations, his weaknesses." "That's a lot of information. You have a lot of time." For the next 4 hours, Higgins talked. He described Torino's compound in New Jersey, his security team of former military contractors, his weekly visits to his mother's grave in a small Catholic cemetery, his pride in his grandson's college graduation next month. Most importantly, he revealed Torino's one consistent vulnerability. Every Sunday morning, the crime boss attended Mass at St. Anthony's Church in Newark, arriving early to pray privately before services began. He brought minimal security, trusting in the sanctity of the church and the predictability of his routine. It was exactly the kind of operational intelligence Daniel needed. "One more thing," Higgins said as Daniel prepared to leave. "Torino isn't just angry about the money you cost him. This is personal for him. Velasquez was his nephew." Daniel paused at the door. "His nephew?" Andre was Gilberto's brother's son. Family meant everything to the old man. When you killed Andre, you didn't just eliminate a business partner. You murdered his family. "Good," Daniel said. "That means he'll be emotional instead of tactical." Emotional enemies make mistakes. As Daniel left the facility, he was already planning an operation that would end the Torino threat permanently. It would be dangerous, probably illegal, and certainly final. But it would also ensure that his children could grow up without looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. In the intelligence world, there was an old saying, sometimes the only way to stop a war is to win it decisively. Daniel Bradford intended to win very decisively indeed. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. St. Anthony's Church in Newark was a modest brick building that had served its predominantly Italian-American congregation for over 70 years. The cemetery behind it held 3 generations of Torino family members, including Gilberto's parents, his brother, and now Andre Velasquez. Daniel arrived at 5 a.m. on Sunday morning, 3 hours before Torino's usual appearance. He'd spent the week conducting surveillance, mapping security patterns, and identifying the optimal position for what would be his final operation. The church was empty except for Father Marco's case, an elderly priest who was preparing for morning mass. Daniel approached him in the sacristy, where the priest was arranging communion wafers and wine. "Father, I need to make a confession." Father Case looked up, taking in Daniel's appearance, well-dressed, but carrying the kind of tension that suggested serious trouble. "Of course, my son. Shall we go to the confessional?" "What I have to confess requires more privacy." The priest studied Daniel's face for a moment, then nodded. "My office, then." Father Case's office was small and cluttered, filled with religious books and family photos of parishioners. The priest settled behind his desk and waited for Daniel to speak. "I'm here to kill a man," Daniel said quietly. Father Case's expression didn't change. After 40 years of hearing confessions in a neighborhood where violence was common, very little surprised him anymore. "Tell me why," the priest said simply. "Because he put a $10 million bounty on my family. Because he's corrupted federal law enforcement and threatened the lives of innocent people. Because he represents an evil that won't stop until it's stopped permanently. And you believe murder is the solution? I believe some people forfeit their right to live when they threaten children." Father Case was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to leave. Take the morning off, visit a sick parishioner, go anywhere but here. In 2 hours, whatever happens in this church, I want you to have no knowledge of it. And if I refuse, then you'll witness something that will haunt you for the rest of your life." The priest looked at the crucifix on his wall, then back at Daniel. "How many children will be safe if this man dies?" "Mine, and probably dozens of others who don't even know they're in danger." Father Case stood slowly. "Mrs. De Leon has been ill. I should visit her this morning." He paused at the office door. "God forgives all sins, my son, but some sins are more necessary than others." After the priest left, Daniel positioned himself in the church's confessional booth. From there, he had a clear view of the altar and the front pews where Torino always sat during his private prayers. More importantly, the confessional's wooden screen would provide concealment until the moment he needed to act. At 7:45 a.m., a black sedan pulled into the church parking lot. 2 men emerged first, bodyguards who quickly scanned the area before signaling the all-clear. Then Gilberto, Torino, stepped out of the car. The crime boss was exactly what Central Casting would order for a mafia don. 70 years old, but still imposing, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the bulk of body armor underneath. He moved with the careful dignity of a man who'd survived 6 decades in a business where most people died young. Torino entered the church alone, leaving his bodyguards outside. He walked to the front pew and knelt, crossing himself before beginning what appeared to be silent prayer. Daniel waited, counting heartbeats and calculating angles. The church was empty except for the 2 of them, and Torino's security team would assume their boss was safe inside the house of God. They were wrong. Daniel emerged from the confessional silently, his weapon drawn but not yet aimed. He wanted Torino to see him coming, wanted the crime boss to understand exactly who was ending his life and why. Torino sensed movement and turned. When he saw Daniel, his expression showed no surprise, only the resignation of a man who'd been expecting this moment for days. "Daniel Bradford," Torino said quietly, "I wondered when you'd come. You threatened my children. You killed my nephew. Your nephew threatened my children first." Torino nodded slowly. "Yes, he did. Andre was always too aggressive, too eager to prove himself. I should have controlled him better." Daniel kept his weapon trained on Torino, but didn't fire. There was something in the old man's tone that suggested this conversation might be more complex than a simple execution. "You put a $10 million bounty on my family," Daniel said. "I did, and I'll remove it if you'll listen to what I have to say." "I'm listening." Torino turned fully to face Daniel, his hands visible and non-threatening. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the pew beside him. In this place, we can speak honestly. Against his better judgment, Daniel sat down, his weapon still ready, but no longer aimed directly at Torino's head. You destroyed something I spent 5 years building, Torino began. The arrangement with Conway, the network of corrupted federal agents, the expansion into your city. All of it is gone because you refuse to simply walk away. You're welcome. Torino actually smiled at that. You have balls, Bradford. I respect that. In different circumstances, I might have offered you a job. In different circumstances, I might have arrested you instead of planning to kill you. Yes, your CIA background. 20 years of government service, fighting America's enemies around the world. Torino's expression grew thoughtful. Tell me, in all those years, how many truly evil men did you kill? Enough. And how many were just men doing their jobs, serving their countries, protecting their families? Daniel understood where this was going. You're not a patriot serving your country, Torino. You're a criminal who corrupts everything you touch. Am I? Or am I a businessman operating in an economy that your government created? Torino leaned forward slightly. The war on drugs has been going on for 50 years, Bradford. Trillions of dollars spent, millions of people imprisoned, and drugs are more available now than when the war started. Your government created a black market worth hundreds of billions of dollars, then acted surprised when entrepreneurs filled the demand. Entrepreneurs who murder, extort, and corrupt, as opposed to governments that invade countries, torture prisoners, and assassinate foreign leaders. Torino shook his head. We're both in the violence business, Bradford. The only difference is that I'm honest about it. Daniel studied the old man's face. There was intelligence there, and a kind of weary pragmatism that came from decades of survival in an impossible business. But there was also something else, a fundamental moral flexibility that allowed him to justify any action in service of his goals. Nice speech, Daniel said, but you still threaten my children. Yes, I did, because in my world, family is everything, and you killed mine. Torino's voice hardened. Andre wasn't just my nephew. He was the closest thing I had to a son. His death required a response. And now I'm tired. Torino looked at the altar with its carved crucifix and flickering candles. I'm 70 years old, Bradford. I've buried 2 wives, most of my friends, and now my nephew. The federal investigation you triggered will destroy what's left of my organization. In 6 months, I'll either be dead or in prison. So I'm prepared to offer you a deal. Daniel waited. The bounty on your family gets withdrawn. Permanently. My remaining associates are told that any action against you or your loved ones will result in my extreme displeasure. You get to go home and live your life. In exchange for what? You let me finish my prayers. Torino turned back toward the altar. After that, what happens is between me and God. Daniel understood. Torino was offering to end the blood feud in exchange for the dignity of dying on his own terms, in his own time, in a place that had meaning for him. How do I know you'll keep your word? Because unlike the federal government, my word actually means something in the circles where it matters. Torino reached into his jacket slowly, withdrawing not a weapon, but a cell phone. One call, and every criminal organization in the world knows that Daniel Bradford and his family are off limits permanently. And if I refuse, then you kill me now, but the bounty remains active. My death will only prove to my associates that you're as dangerous as they feared. They'll spend whatever it takes to eliminate the threat you represent. Daniel considered the offer. Killing Torino would provide immediate satisfaction, but wouldn't solve the larger problem. The crime boss's death would create a power vacuum that could lead to even more violence as various factions fought for control of his territory. But letting him live, in exchange for genuine protection for Daniel's family, would end the threat permanently. Make the call, Daniel said. Torino dialed a number and spoke in rapid Italian for several minutes. When he finished, he showed Daniel the phone screen, a text message in English that read, Daniel Bradford and family, permanent protection status. Violation punishable by death. GT. The message had been sent to over 24 contacts. It's done, Torino said, pocketing the phone. Your family is now under the protection of the Torino name. Anyone who harms them will answer to my successors, assuming I have any. Daniel stood, holstering his weapon. What happens now? Now you leave. Go home to your wife and children. Pretend this conversation never happened. And you? Torino turned back to the altar, kneeling on the worn carpet. I finish my prayers and wait for whatever comes next. As Daniel walked toward the church's exit, Torino called out softly, "Bradford." Daniel paused. Your children are lucky to have a father willing to do anything to protect them. Don't let them forget that. Outside the church, Torino's bodyguards looked surprised to see Daniel emerge alone and unharmed. They tensed, hands moving toward their weapons, but Daniel simply walked to his motorcycle and drove away. Behind him, in the quiet sanctuary of St. Anthony's Church, Gilberto Torino knelt before God and waited for absolution that might never come. Daniel Bradford drove home to his family, carrying the weight of a war that had ended not in violence, but in an understanding between two fathers who'd both been willing to kill for the people they loved. Sometimes that understanding was enough. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. 6 months later, Daniel stood in the backyard of their new house, watching Emma and Michael play on the swing set he'd built for them. The house was smaller than their previous home, but situated on 3 acres of wooded land that provided natural security barriers and multiple escape routes. Old habits that Jennifer had learned not to question. The moving truck had left an hour ago, taking the last of their possessions from the federal safe house to what the family hoped would be their permanent home. The witness protection program had been officially terminated after Gilberto Torino's death 3 months earlier. A heart attack suffered in his sleep that surprised no one who knew his health history. Coffee's ready, Jennifer called from the kitchen door. Daniel made his way inside, past the boxes they were still unpacking and the security equipment he discreetly installed throughout the house. The kitchen table was covered with mail, school enrollment forms, and the detritus of a family trying to rebuild their normal life. Any interesting mail? Daniel asked, settling into his chair. Jennifer handed him a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Newark Star-Ledger, an obituary for Gilberto Torino that described him as a beloved community patriarch and successful businessman. Attached was a handwritten note in Italian that Daniel recognized from his language training. Il debito è stato pagato. The debt has been paid. What is it? Jennifer asked. Nothing important, Daniel replied, filing the note away mentally. The Torino organization had kept their word. There had been no further threats, no bounty hunters, no midnight phone calls. The war was truly over. His phone rang. Mitchell's number. Morning, partner. How's domestic life treating you? Like house arrest with better coffee, Daniel replied. What's the situation at the office? Busy. Very busy. Apparently, word has gotten out about our recent activities. We've got 3 new contracts this week, all high security, all very well paying. Daniel wasn't surprised. In the private security world, successfully taking on organized crime was the kind of reputation builder that led to exponentially more business. Bradford & Associates was now fielding inquiries from multinational corporations, foreign governments, and wealthy individuals who wanted the same level of protection that had kept Daniel's family safe. Any of them interesting? All of them. But there's one that might particularly appeal to you. Remember Viktor Kozlov? Daniel went very still. Kozlov's dead. I killed him myself in Afghanistan. His brother isn't. Dmitry Kozlov has taken over what's left of the family arms dealing operation, and he's apparently been asking questions about the CIA operatives who eliminated Viktor. How do you know this? Because he reached out to us directly. Wants to hire Bradford and Associates to provide security for a weapons transaction in Montenegro next month. Daniel processed this information. Dmitry Kozlov hiring the man who'd killed his brother was either supremely confident or supremely stupid. More likely, it was a trap designed to lure Daniel into a situation where Kozlov could exact revenge. Thoughts? Mitchell asked. I think Mr. Kozlov is about to learn that some operations have longer-term consequences than he anticipated. So we take the contract. Daniel looked out the kitchen window at his children, who were laughing as they chased each other around the yard. Emma had started a new school and was already making friends. Michael had joined a little league team and was excited about his first game next weekend. They deserved a father who came home every night, not one who disappeared on mysterious business trips to deal with arms dealers in foreign countries. No, Daniel said finally. We don't take contracts that put family at risk anymore. Even high-paying ones with interesting challenges, especially those. After ending the call, Daniel found Jennifer in their bedroom, unpacking clothes and arranging them in the walk-in closet. She'd been quieter than usual during the move, and he could sense something weighing on her mind. "What's bothering you?" he asked. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding one of his old CIA commendation plaques. "Do you ever regret it? Giving up that life, becoming just another suburban security consultant? Do you regret giving up Andre Velasquez for just another suburban husband?" The question hung in the air for a moment before Jennifer smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in months. "Point taken. But seriously, Danny, you were important in that world. You made a difference. I'm making a difference now. Just a smaller, more personal one. Is it enough?" Daniel considered the question. 20 years of international operations, classified missions, and life-or-death situations had been replaced by corporate security consultations, background checks, and the occasional investigation of insurance fraud. On paper, it looked like a significant step down. But when Emma ran into the bedroom to show them a drawing she'd made of their new house, when Michael asked for help with his math homework, when Jennifer fell asleep beside him without the nightmares that had plagued her for months, those moments felt more important than any CIA operation he'd ever completed. "Yes," he said, "it's enough." That evening, the family had dinner together at their new kitchen table. Emma talked about her teacher, who she thought was probably the nicest person in the world. Michael described his baseball practice, complete with dramatic reenactments of his catching technique. Jennifer announced that she'd found a part-time job at a local art gallery, legitimate employment that had nothing to do with money laundering or criminal boyfriends. As they cleared the dishes, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Family barbecue Sunday. Your whole family invited. Address attached. Father MC. Father Marcos case. The priest from St. Anthony's Church." Somehow, the elderly cleric had tracked down Daniel's new address and was extending an invitation to what appeared to be a community gathering. "What is it?" Jennifer asked, noticing his expression. "An invitation to a church barbecue. Are we going?" Daniel looked around the kitchen of their new home, at the family photos Jennifer had already hung on the walls, at the refrigerator that was slowly accumulating Emma and Michael's artwork. This was what he'd fought for. Not just their physical safety, but their right to live normal lives in a normal community. "Yeah," he said, "I think we are." Later that night, after the children were asleep and Jennifer was reading in bed, Daniel stood on his back porch and looked out at the woods surrounding their property. Somewhere in those trees, motion sensors and cameras maintained a discreet perimeter watch. Old habits died hard, and some precautions were worth maintaining. But for the first time in years, Daniel Bradford felt genuinely at peace. The ghosts of his past were finally at rest, and the shadows that had threatened his family had been banished permanently. In the distance, an owl called out across the darkness, a sound of wilderness and freedom that reminded Daniel that some things were worth any sacrifice to protect. He'd been a ghost for 20 years, moving through the world's most dangerous places and eliminating threats to American interests. Now he was something different, a husband, a father, a man who'd chosen family over adventure and found that the choice brought its own kind of fulfillment. The war was over. The ghost had finally come home, and for Daniel Bradford, that was the most successful mission of all.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.